Ever wondered how rich the US really is? Does Uncle Sam swim in a pool of gold coins like Scrooge McDuck, or is he more of a penny pincher? Let's open the money bags and see. To understand the wealth of a country, we don't count the gold coins or dollar bills, but we turn to something called Gross Domestic Product, or GDP for short. Imagine GDP as the total price tag of all goods and services produced within the US borders in a year. Simply put, if the US was a giant store, the GDP would be our year-end sales total. Now, calculating GDP isn't as simple as adding up all the price tags from our giant store. Economists have a special formula for that, involving consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports. But don't worry, we won't dive into those murky waters today. By this measure, the US is less like Scrooge McDuck and more like Richie Rich. Rich, but not quite swimming in gold coins. But GDP is just one slice of the wealth pie. Let's not forget about Uncle Sam's massive piggy bank, also known as the US Federal Reserve. Now, the Federal Reserve isn't your ordinary piggy bank. It's more like a magical money-making machine. It's the wizard behind the curtain, controlling the supply of money, setting interest rates, and playing puppet master with the economy. Essentially, the Fed's job is to keep the economy humming along nicely, like a well-oiled machine. It's like the conductor of a grand orchestra, ensuring all parts play together in harmony. When the economy starts to sound more like a punk rock concert than a symphony, the Fed steps in to fine-tune the instruments. The Federal Reserve's impact on the nation's wealth is undeniable. It's like the secret ingredient in Uncle Sam's wealth recipe. So next time you're thinking about the wealth of the US, remember that it's not all about GDP. So with the GDP and the Federal Reserve, Uncle Sam is looking more like Tony Stark, super rich and with a lot of fancy toys. But wait, there's a plot twist. Uncle Sam also has a mountain of debt, more like a Mount Everest of debt. Now imagine Uncle Sam, decked out in his stars and stripes, donning a climbing gear, and looking up at the towering Everest. That's basically his financial situation, only with a lot more zeros attached. This debt mountain is no ordinary hill. It's a monstrous, gargantuan peak that makes the Grand Canyon look like a pothole. It's so large, in fact, that if each dollar were a foot, we could take a leisurely stroll to the moon and back, about 20 times. And every year, instead of scaling down, our dear uncle adds more to his Everest. It's like he's trying to reach Mars now, only with debt. But here's the kicker. This debt affects the country's wealth. It's like having a bank account with $1 billion, but owing $2 billion. With that mountain of debt, Uncle Sam is starting to look less like Tony Stark and more like a college student with a maxed-out credit card. So how rich is the US really? Well, it's like asking how long is a piece of string. When it comes to the United States' wealth, we're dealing with some pretty hefty numbers. The country's gross domestic product, or GDP, is a staggering $14 trillion. That's a lot of zeros, folks. Then there's the Federal Reserve assets, a cool $7 trillion. But wait, there's more. The national debt is a whopping $28 trillion. This is like saying you own a mansion, a yacht, and a private jet. But you also owe money to every bank in town. It's not so much a question of how rich, but more how indebted. And let's not even get started on the complexity of measuring wealth. It's like trying to count the number of stars in the sky, or the grains of sand on a beach. In the end, the US is like a billionaire with a bad credit score, incredibly wealthy, but with a lot of bills to pay. Now isn't that a rich irony?